identify the boundary. So each of these groups can identify their own boundary. It has to then be approved by the Sheffield City Council, but there's a question that comes, oh, what happens if you get so many and you get a bit left out? It would have to be squeezed into somebody's neighbourhood plan. Landform and shops, it's 10 minutes from the centre. it's in, has little green, well, it has some additional green space, but there's little in the city centre. The aim is to reflect planning decisions with the residents and businesses. And again, one of the people leading this is an ex-professor from one of our departments. And he has explained to us that the process of doing this, he was a sociology professor, and he's just learned so much about changing governance, how much it's been a neighbourly activity, and how much there's been learning about the local environment. So he and the people involved have really enjoyed this process. But what I want to do is show you this map. This map is our city, and this is the city by deprivation. So the poorer areas. So we tend to have what we call multiple indices of deprivation, which relate to health, education and income. And people who are not so well educated tend to have lower incomes and poorer health. And you can see the blue, the better areas. So this is the top 10%. Then we move here, and then you can see as it gets redder, these are the poorer and the more deprived areas. And you can see this very strong shift from west to east, except for a couple of pockets that are better off here. And what's very interesting is that all these three neighbourhood plans are in the west of the city, in the better off areas. And this is one of my great concerns about this approach. First of all, there's only three. And if this is going to work, do we need the whole city to be covered by one? And in some cities, I don't think any city in the country has yet got this. And then what is going to happen here, where the people are dealing with other things and perhaps haven't got the time, the energy, can't be bothered to think about the planning processes. So I think there are ways in which this is a really good idea, but there are some very big issues about it as well. And it may be, in 10 years' time, this will have been resolved. I don't know. So despite there is national support from a big international multidisciplinary organisation to help people through the processes, and there are small amounts of money, but I still think that this is a questionable process, and we'll have to see what happens in the next 10 or so years. Now, what I want to do is move on from looking at the green spaces. So part of the reflection on this is what happens to connecting green spaces when you've got just neighbourhoods looking at things, okay? It's really important that the citywide structure is very strong still to hold those issues together for the green spaces. So if we just go back, I've told you that there's a green space strategy, but what we now also have is a developing water management strategy. And this is increasingly an issue in our country, because in recent years we have had increasing flooding in some parts of the country. Now, some parts of the country where the flooding has happened are areas that are very low and close to sea level and really have almost been reclaimed from the sea. I'm not talking about the east of the country. There's areas in the sort of southwest that were levels, and originally when they were built, hundreds of years ago, they were known that these were areas that would flood. So perhaps we should be surprised that those flood, but what also is happening is that other areas are flooding. And just to show you our city, in 2007, we had so much rain that the peat moors on the west of the city were saturated, and the water just ran down into the city, down those small streams, which became like rivers, in fact. So here is part of our town centre, down towards where one of the rivers is. These are the bus stops. Obviously, I didn't take this photo. This is from an elevated picture position, and you can see that it was completely flooded. further up one of the river valleys. This is the play equipment, this is a tall piece of equipment, and this is a park that actually, I think, is that the football pitch? I don't know. And, you know, this flooded because there wasn't enough capacity because of all the building that has gone on in our city. And we are not the biggest of cities. We do not have lots of naughty, tall buildings. The heat issue in our city, I don't think is as big as somewhere like London, certainly isn't. But we have these rivers and we have culverted some of them into very small spaces. And this did a lot of damage. There were 2 deaths during this, which is very unusual for a city like us. And so, since then, the local authority has been looking at a water management strategy. And it has received some money from the government, because the government has acknowledged that this is a problem. There are amazing photographs of the River Thames west of London, because that flooded very badly. If you want to find those, you can just Google them. They're very, very dramatic. And that was important because these were rich people being flooded. So some go, oh, this isn't good. Anyway, so we have a national flood programme. I don't know all the details of it, but the aim is to protect buildings from 1 in 200-year flood rather than 1 in a 25-year flood. Now it's very interesting because I thought we were working on a 1 in 100-year flood anyway, but because we have had increasing flooding in our cities, they're now saying actually it was a 1 in 25-year. And I just think it's just become so unpredictable. Our weather used to be so clear where the seasons were, but we now sometimes have very wet summers. We also, so a few years ago we had the wettest summer for 100 years. We are sometimes having very wet winters. So last year we had a lot of rain because when I was little, it would have fallen as snow, but it wasn't cold enough. So it's unpredictable is what I would say now. I don't know if your weather is changing like that in a way that I would say is unpredictable. Here are the centre, and here's the main rivers. As I say, they're all small, and the aim is to try and stop the water coming down into the city when we have these massive rain times, and particularly when it's the water saturated. So to hold the water further back, and there's various strategies being taken for that. So one is about having flood storage areas, and this is designating open spaces where flood water can collect before draining off gradually without reaching the buildings. So my local park, which you've seen pictures of, Encliffe Park, in 2007, it was flooded. The river comes in and goes under a road, and the culvert under the road really is no higher than this desk, and about that wide, and the water was bouncing in and coming back out. Now, because it's a culvert under this road, it would be difficult, because of the space to build another culvert. So the idea is to hold that water back in the park. So they're redesigning that to put a new embankment, trying to make that multi-functional so that at other times it could be an embankment for watching activities. It's a very well-used large piece of grass. But people are going, oh, I don't know if we want this. So local communities are being consulted on various locations where this is proposed, which is good that they're being informed, which isn't what happened with street trees. I can see that this is a really important thing to do, but it's about educating people and helping them to understand why this is a good thing, and that hasn't happened with the street trees, okay? Apart from what you're taking all the trees in one row down isn't the right way to do it. I think it should be timed, okay? So I think this is a very interesting way, and this consultation is currently underway. And it is quite controversial, I think. But there are other things that are happening. So there are some culverts, that's a tunnel carrying water under a railway or a built-up area, that's the definition for people who don't know. And so they've been doing extensive surveys and assessments, consultation, tenders are being developed, and the works will start on site in a couple of years and be completed in 2 years after that. So this is a long programme. It isn't just going to happen overnight, and a lot of these issues are in the way that regenerating the open spaces in the city centre has taken place over a 15-year period. This is a programme taking place over a number of years. We've got very little brooks like this, very cute. And you might think, there's nothing. But even these are important in actually how we manage them and making sure enough water can flow down them and be retained at particular places. Some of these are very old. Jervey Slum is a small one that's very old. A lot of people don't even know it's there. So these are on the east of the city, and the aim is to protect a lot of homes, many of which are social housing and businesses. So these are all being looked at and developed. And then in other parts of the city, we have things like this, where this flooded very badly as well. So there's a lot of initiatives within a water strategy now complementing our green space strategy. And I would now, if I was writing that book, I would go back and say actually one of the benefits of green spaces is to help with water management. But it wasn't there in my mind 14, 15, 16 years ago whenever I first wrote the book. But it's a really big issue. And that's partly because of what's happened with the climate even in those 15 or 20 years. In other parts of the world that deal with it in particular ways, so really good examples in somewhere like Germany, where you can see what's going to happen. This fills up with water. So this looks good, whether it's not full of water or whether it's full of water, but actually getting some of our students to understand that something has to look good even when it hasn't got water in, and a lot of the time it will not have water in, can be quite difficult. So visualising that yourselves is very important. I think that looks lovely, doesn't it, with the water? And then there's all the things about water edges. So here in London, there's issues, and some of the ways forward are also roof gardens to help accommodate some water. And one of my colleagues is very big on roof garden design. So it's about bringing all these different elements together. But I think when we're looking at our cities and the importance of connecting our green spaces and understanding what they can do and how they should be planned and designed and managed, we have to now really be looking at water as well. And you have lots of water here in Bennett Park. Lots of water. Some of the water edges have been built on. What is that going to mean if this floods? What's going to happen to those homes? Do those people realise that they've built on the edge of the lake? They may not actually realise, I don't know. They might think, oh, we just build here. So there's going to be a big issue, I think, in a lot of cities across the world for this. So there's a question of what is the path for the future? This is just, I use this for students because all the funding and policy has gone in our country. Is the path for our green spaces, does it just come to an end? But it can't do. So as professionals, we need to be thinking very seriously about this. It's one of the reasons you need to be able to argue the case for why green spaces and the management of the water is important, because politicians and funders and developers don't always realise this. So as well as being good technically, I believe we have to be advocates for all of this in our cities. Thank you very much.